Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Oh, hello, Nikki Kinzer. We are, oh, man. You know, we did a little entertainment clutch in the beginning for our members, and you could say that my pick is really adjacent to what we're talking about today. I picked g.r.a.c.e. Oh, Terror in the High Seas. And
apparently
we're
with
talking,
sharks and orcas.
With sharks and orcas. Oh, it's so good. And now we're talking about emotional flooding, which you could say everyone in that cast is doing every time they go to work. Emotional flooding. I can't wait to introduce you to our guests. We're going to do that in just a second. But first, head over to takecontroladhd.com and get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to our mailing list. And we would love to send you an email each time a new episode is released. Of course, connect with us on Blue Sky or Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest at Take Control ADHD and jump into the Discord community. That's where all the peoples are. Just head over to takecontroladhd.com/Discord. That'll get you into the free stuff, the general and public community channels. But of course, this is it. This is the plug. This is the pitch. I don't know if you've noticed, Pete gestures broadly. The economy is doing some crazy things right now. And you know what's really helpful? If you're in a place to support, visit patreon.com/the ADHD Podcast. This is listener-supported podcasting. And for a few bucks from you, from each of you, that adds up to a lot of team support for us. It's not just me and Nikki doing this thing. It's a whole bunch of people on the back end of the TCA team that are making this show possible. So if this show has ever helped you and your relationship with ADHD live in a new way, together in harmony, we would love you to visit patreon.com/the ADHD Podcast. Of course, you get access to the double and triple secret Discord channels, depending on when you what tier you actually join. And you can join us for live streams. You can ask questions live to our esteemed guests, all of the good stuff. Patreon.com/the ADHD Podcast. You know that moment when your emotions stop trickling and start to pour, the pressure builds, and suddenly we're underwater, like g.r.a.c.e. For people living with ADHD, this experience isn't rare, it's routine. Psychologist John Gottman called it emotional flooding. So what is it really, and what can be done when those waves come crashing in? Today on the ADHD Podcast, we're diving into the flooded brain, with the stories and strategies behind emotional flooding. To help us navigate these turbulent waters, I am watching too much g.r.a.c.e. is really what's happening. We're joined by two extraordinary guests and our final pairing in our ADHD Duo series with Dr. Dodre and Dr. Sharon Saline. Dear friends, welcome back to the ADHD Podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so fun to be here.
Yes.
So fun, and so fun to have you guys together. You both are many-time returning champions of the ADHD Podcast. And you both actually have diminutive nicknames in our community, Dr. Sharon and Dr. Dodge. So, you know, that's a status that few have achieved. So we're so glad to have you together. Let's start with where emotional flooding comes from. Now, I know this has originated from John Gottman, and but he was a relationships guy. I'm wondering where the flooding part came from. Are either of you in a space to talk about where this comes from?
I don't know if I know the history around that. I mean, when that first got named, it was sure well named, though, right? It gives you that sense of like the feelings are coming too fast and, in too numerously in too many directions for me to really swim. I feel like the water's rising and I fear I can't breathe. This is a really cool topic, specifically around ADHD, because it is, it's something I think, neurodivergence can add to. It becomes that much more present in this community even than in the general one.
some of the kids I've worked with, one of the kids I worked says it's like a tidal wave, and suddenly I'm just trying to keep my head above water. So I think I don't know about the history of the term emotional flooding, but I do understand the biology of it. And, that what happens is that a feeling is experienced by the body, sort of determined, in a fight, flight, or freeze kind of sensation. So when the body senses danger, and some of those these big feelings are basically experienced as danger, that the kind of the executive functioning skills that work towards helping us manage our feelings kind of take a little trip to the Bahamas, and our emotional brain starts running the show. And so when that happens, the feelings are what's taking charge. And we call that, either an amygdala hijack. I call it an amygdala takeover. And so is sadness, well, you'd say, well, sadness is not a danger. No, but usually what happens is that, that's a feeling, and it builds, and you can't manage it. So the feeling kind of overflows. And in that way, it's not a fight, flight, or freeze, but it's not a fight, flight, or freeze. Do you know what I'm saying, Dodge? Can you explain that maybe a little bit?
Let me add to what you're saying, or at least give it some additional language as we see if we can understand how it is and is not a fight, flight, freeze state. So if the amygdala is this alarm center for the brain, right? This is this part of us that activates when we perceive ourselves to be facing the situation for which we're really under equipped, right? That can be internal or external. And the amygdala will kick on when we feel like we are not going to be able to think through what's happening and we need to do something very quickly to ensure some kind of survival, right? And the basic moves towards survival are fight with what's happening, run from what's happening, or shut down, that freeze state. The first two are, highly sympathetic, and the second one is a massive flood of parasympathetic activity that says, "Let's just go ahead and prepare for death," right? And we get really, really stuck. Okay. And when that's all happening, that the blood's moving from the prefrontal cortex, toward the back of the brain where we are much more efficient, but a whole lot less nuanced in our thinking. We can't look at a grizzly standing on her hind legs and think, oh, no wonder she's stressed out. She's got cubs. But isn't she beautiful? What a magnificent creature. And I bet you these kids, I mean, they don't seem to be that stressed. I wonder if there's a way I could talk about this with her. You're dead by the time you've had any of these.
Right, that's why the thinking needs to go to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
You're right.
Right.
Exactly. We've got to get out of there now, right? Yeah. And what I think I understand about ADHD, at least what I've read lately, is that already the amygdala is a little bit overactive. And the prefrontal cortex, this executive functioning part we talk about all the time, is a little underactive. And it sets up a predisposition to this kind of flooding because the amygdala can keep generating more and more attention on what scares us. And the prefrontal cortex has a harder time assessing how much of that is real and useful and pertinent and how much of it isn't. And so that all of a sudden you've just got a wall of water of feeling coming at you, and it's hard to tease it apart.
It's almost like the executive functioning skills are sort of a gatekeeper, or and they kind of they can kind of block out things that are either unimportant, or help us to sort of get small pieces of information that we can process appropriately. And there's a way in which I think that with the fight, flight, or freeze aspects of the amygdala, that freeze is kind of like what the experience of flooding is. A lot of times people with ADHD talk about this overwhelm freeze, right? Or the sort of ADHD paralysis, decision paralysis, task paralysis. And those are sort of a lower order of the brain functioning. It's like I can't process all this information. And so the feeling that I'm having is a response to that. Maybe I'm afraid, maybe I'm angry, whatever it is. And so we move into that kind of a freeze response. Dr. Stephen Porges talks about the different types of brain responses in his work. That freeze is associated with a certain way of responding.
There are a couple of things you've brought up that have surprised me already. First of all, that the freeze is a part of emotional flooding, because I guess in my experience I've never associated flooding. Seems like such a big concept, right? It's a big active concept, and I would have called it, maybe to stay with the Dr. Odyssey framework of today, emotional drowning. Like, I can't do anything because I'm so overwhelmed. That all of this is a part of the same emotional sort of amygdala hijack, amygdala takeover is interesting to me. How do I tell the difference? And I'm recognizing this is a complex question, but how would one tell the difference between this sort of emotional flooding and which the amygdala driven hijacked flooding, and a panic attack, for example, or some sort of anxiety response, or rejection sensitivity, RSD? We've talked about that a number of times. How do these concepts relate?
Sure. So, when we think about, this idea that our system, our brain, we're wired for two things. We're wired for safety and danger, right? We either seek safety or we seek danger. And so, and then, our nervous system responds to things that we believe are safe and certain, and things that are unsafe and uncertain, things that are dangerous. And that's part of what polyvagal theory talks about, for those people who understand it, that it influences our emotional and our social behaviors. Um, when we think about, rejection sensitive dysphoria or some of the other things you mentioned, those are states in which someone experiences has an interactional experience that's then processed in a particular way. So if you have a history, for example, of being put down, of being told you're not good enough, or you're not smart enough, or you don't get things right, or you're rejected, or you've been bullied, the tendency that you're going to have to respond to a situation that might smell of some sort of criticism or exclusion is going to be bigger than actually what the situation might be calling for. And the bigness of that response with ADHD has to do with that overactive, whether it's the amygdala or some of the other systems in the brain, that's saying it's sort of a bigger response. And that bigger response can come in that way of flooding, of emotional dysregulation, and of sometimes in overthinking what's actually happening, versus what you think is happening. Like, you're attributing things to a situation based on your history that might not actually be relevant for the current experience.
That's it's really interesting, and sort of separates the emotional flooding to the lowercase t trauma that we grow up with, right? And with ADHD, it also describes why ADHD gets flooded faster, because of the outsized weight of our history. Is that fair?
Well, yes, and also, a lot of people with ADHD, I think 10 to 20% of children with ADHD have sensory processing issues. And so what happens is, we take in information through our senses, and then I believe our thalamus kind of processes that information. And if there's a danger, it will send a signal to the amygdala, danger, and then activate the hypothalamus, which sort of sends cortisol and adrenaline running through us, so we can tighten up our muscles and run really fast from the tiger. And today we don't necessarily have tigers in our lives, but we experience things as tigers. So you get an email from your boss at 9 o'clock at night that says, "I want to meet with you in the morning," and suddenly the tiger's in your house. Right. And so it's not like, oh, okay. It's sort of, that's kind of this was part of anxiety. It's like, great, we're going to have a meeting. That's great. What goes through your mind is, what did I do wrong?
Yes.
Yeah.
What
I'm
what
getting fired.
I'm getting fired. And so there's all
Mhm.
of these worst case scenarios. And we see that a lot with people with ADHD because of the history of that, the 1,000 paper cuts a day, that sort of perpetual trauma of living with a neurodivergent brain in a neurotypical world.
Yeah. I'd be interested in all your takes on this. I have a sense that emotional flooding for ADHD very often at its core is a combination of fear and shame. Like there's this sense of I'm scared of, the boss meeting in the morning, the wait a minute, I just lost the whole morning and most of the afternoon and I have way too much to do and I won't get it done. And so that's scary. And then the next thing is, and there I go again, I suck, or it's too much. I'll never be able to do this all. And now I'm in trouble.
I think there's so many connections to that. There's so many connections. And I think that, the shame is so deep for so many people. And no matter how much self-compassion, training or radical acceptance people are reading about, the challenge for them is that each day of living offers a new opportunity to mess up
Yes. Okay.
and not forgive yourself. I wanna also say something about what I said earlier about Dr. Porges's theory of polyvagal. So he talks about 3 different things: ventral, vagal, which is, social engagement and you have safety, and then there's sympathetic state, which is that fight or flight, and then there's the dorsal vagal state, which is the shutdown. And so, I think that it's when I think about freeze, overwhelming emotions or emotional flooding, I'm really thinking about the dorsal ventral state, because you're sort of like stunned.
And there's a fourth state that's worth naming too that gets talked about sometimes in polyvagal theory, where they make a distinction between the dorsal vagal shutdown and a free state. And I'd never heard this named quite, or I'd never heard this distinction until I don't know in the last few years, where somebody said um, a free state is one where you have all of your sympathetic nervous system activated and all of the gas pedal is on. This is the part that wants to fight or flight or get something, do something, and all of the parasympathetic system fully activated, which is the brake pedal that says stop at the same time. So it's like gas pedal on the floor, emergency brake on, and your whole system is like, just like activated. All your muscles are tense. You want to take action. You don't know what to do. That's like a panic attack. A dorsal vagal shutdown is where one notch past that, where parasympathetic has totally taken over because sympathetic had nothing it could do. So it would be like, imagine that you're on a boat that's sinking and you're in a cabin below deck and the water has started to climb and it's up your shins. And this is where you go from parasympathetic to sympathetic. This is the part that says, I better do something fast. I got to get out of this room. I got to get up above deck. I got to get on a lifeboat. Do something, right? Like fight it or flee. So you're either bailing water or you're getting out of there. Imagine then that it gets to your chin. At this point, you can't figure out what to do, but you're desperately trying to keep your head above water and breathe, but you can't get out of the room. You're trapped, right? That's the the freeze state of like, I am activated, but I can't do anything. And this is, I think, where a lot of us get to when we're flooded. And then the dorsal vagal is the one where it's now over your head and you're just preparing to drown. And your face goes slack, your muscles go weak, you're dissociating, you're watching yet another episode of a show you've already seen because you're in total avoidance of what you really needed to be doing that afternoon, or preparing for your meeting the next day, or calling your friend to find out if really they do hate your guts or not, whatever it might be activated. It's like you're now totally underwater and you're starting to just collapse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it also describes for me why when I think about my emotional regulation curve, right? If I'm plotting just what the shape of that experience is like, it's very, very quick to get me to that heightened state, and very, very long to get me out of it again. Right? Like the curve is like straight up and then a long, long, shallow arc, over time.
When you say that, Pete, the thing is, it takes nanoseconds for our systems to activate that, oh, we're in danger and we need to do something. And it takes the brain, I think somewhere around 3 minutes to kind of recover from that, but it takes the body like 20 minutes because that's what some of the research that I've read says. So, of course, it's like you're activated and then you're like, "Ooh, you're still activated for a while," you know?
Which leads me to, especially in the context of ADHD, I want to talk a little bit about the consequences of living your life in this state, both from a sort of emotional, practical emotional impact, and a sort of a somatic impact. Like, what is it doing to your body when you're living in this sort of emotional flooded state?
Let me narrate the thought process as I go. Um, it's a really interesting question and a very important one because it really matters. And I'm scared to answer it because of the people who live here a whole lot of the time. I'm afraid it's just going to add to the shame and paralysis that goes with, oh, great. On top of being completely useless, I'm also killing myself with stress hormones. Awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it's not very good for us to live under chronic stress. Fortunately, there is also some research out there that's saying stress isn't always as bad for us as we think, as long as we find ways to feel effectual. Like if we can find, yes, under stress, I can manage, I can handle this, I'm swimming just fine. That's not so bad. What's not so great is when we're constantly in this place of, there I go again, I suck. I'm just going to add to that case I've been building against I'm not so great. Um, either I deserve the rejection that I've been so sensitive to, or I don't really believe in myself to be able to get out of this or to live a life that I can feel proud of and happy about. Well, then that's not so great, right?
When we talked earlier about shame, and I wanna come back to that, Pete, because, I think that, if we're building backwards, if shame's like in the deep basement, and then we have, you know, um, the negative things that we tell ourselves, like you're not smart, or you don't get it right, or you don't matter, or you're not lovable. And then we have above that, oh my gosh, I made another mistake. And then we have above that, I'm just going along living my life. And then it's like you trip and you stumble and you realize, I didn't even know I made a mistake. It's like I'm getting feedback that I did something that wasn't okay when I didn't know it wasn't okay. So then there's a lot of shame and emotion that can happen there. And then there's the other thing where you are actively triggered by a situation or a person that sets you off and you kind of lose it. And though, to me, like we haven't really gotten into that part yet. Like, what do you do when you are in, when you're, when you're the fight part of your amygdala has taken over and you are really racing against that tiger, and the person that you're yelling at is your 10-year-old kid,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
or
yeah.
your partner who you actually love, but you just lost it.
And they just happen to be in front of you at the time.
Or they happen, like kids have this amazing ability to like press the invisible red button on your chest.
Yep.
It sets you off. Like nobody else sees it, but your kid knows it's there and they just like wail on it. And so they do these things that are really, provocative.
I have this thought. I wanna before we jump into what do you do about it, I wanna run a parallel narrative for what's happening, right? We've got the neurological one, we've certainly got lots of psychological ones. There are a lot of ways to understand what exactly is emotional flooding. I have another one I wanted to add that just came to me strongly this week. What if emotional flooding or limbic hijacking is essentially a trance?
Like a dissociative state?
A little bit. Yeah. So I did a bunch of hypnosis training along the way. And the definition of this particular school of thought for trance is going to sound a little weedy, but we'll break it down. It's the psychophysiological state of aroused, focused awareness, right? With a corresponding diminution of outside awareness. So you are aroused and hyper focused while also able to ignore all evidence to the contrary, right? And think about what ADHD is so good at and bad at the same time. Like hyper focus is both the superpower of ADHD and the kryptonite at the same time, right? It's that state we can get into where uh if we're stimulated enough, we can't let go, right? If we're not stimulated enough, we can't seem to lock on to something we need to focus on. If we're too stimulated, we can't let go, right? But that makes things that are novel, interesting, challenging, or urgent, especially, really interesting and make them hard to let go. And so if our amygdala starts to kick in with, I'm not good enough, or there I go again, or oh my God, my kid is freaking driving me crazy, or I have too much to do and I'm failing again, right? We start to get scared and we hyper focus on all the evidence that pushes our old buttons, as Dr. Sharon's talking about, our historical stuff around, what I can't manage, right? What if it's a trance state that we get hyper focused on and then we start to ignore all of the useful data around us that A, we can do it, B, wait a minute, my kid does love me, and so on, right? And when we get stuck in that place, it becomes kind of this echo chamber inside us that we can't escape. And then we either get really activated or we totally shut down.
I do feel like that when you're in like a limbic hot takeover, there is a way that you are not you're present in the situation because you're responding to the situation, but you're not present in the effect that you're having, that your response is having on other people, right? So you're present, but you're not present.
Yeah. We lose context, right? Like we can get stuck on what's wrong and then lose all the context around either the effect I'm having or the number of choices I have that I might exercise that would feel really good, or even the fact that we've stopped
Yeah.
breathing
Yeah.
normally, right? You can get really stuck there.
Mhm.
So I wanted to bring that in as a parallel track because I have a feeling a lot of the really cool ideas we'll have about how to stop this runaway train turn out to be ways to also break a trance.
Well, and that's exactly where I want to go, because there's this whole idea behind building a sort of repair conversation. Like to Sharon's point, when you've just freaked out at your kid, for something they didn't do, they just triggered you inadvertently.
Uh-huh.
How do you begin building this sort of regulation and recovery tool uh, to get yourself normalized, to take back over your limbic system? What are the triggers that we use to my favorite term, what is the pattern interrupt? Like how do you break where you are and jolt yourself back into a sense of reality where you could see that the bear is beautiful and has cubs?
I think it starts before. And this is what I work on with my clients, and it's, part of my STAR approach, stop, think, act, recover. So that's, sort of grounded in the 5 C's. We have to notice our physiological changes that are signals that we're heading off into the limbic nowhere land. Like, if you think about, um Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. This is my favorite example. So the Roadrunner is like running across this plateau, and then he turns a hard left, and Wile E. Coyote is, you know, chasing him on the plateau, and he is going too fast to turn left, and he goes off the plateau and is like, he's hanging in the air, and he's realizing like, oh shoot, oops, and then he crashes to the ground, and then that was the end of the scene, and then they would start over with him, like, in a new place as if that had never happened.
Very resilient, Wile E.
He was
Coyote.
very
Very
Yes, he
resilient.
was.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but the thing is, I think that happens to people with ADHD. It's like they're sort of running so fast, and they're off the cliff, and then they realize too late, oops, I have completely lost it. And then they either, do a number of different kinds of coping mechanisms. One might be blaming other people. One might be being over apologetic. One might be hating themselves on the inside, but acting on the outside like everything is fine. There's all kinds of ways that people cope with these situations or try to cope. And I think that we gotta start before the running, right? And or that you have the urge to run, or that you notice that your voice is getting louder. For me, I ask people, where do you feel it in your bodies? I'll ask you each right now. When you start to get activated, where do you feel it? I feel it right here. I start to feel tightness in my chest, and sometimes now I feel it like right under in my solar plexus, kind of like um something is off.
It's like connected for me behind my eyes. I get a little dizzy and the world gets a little small. And then it's a shooting anxiety from my back of my head into my chest.
Okay. How about you, Nikki?
Oh, definitely in my stomach. I can feel myself like tightening, in my stomach. I almost like I'm doing a push up. I mean, a sit up, not a push up, a sit up.
And Dodge, you?
I relate to all of those. If I catch it early enough, I'll even feel it in my eyes. It's like my eyes start to grip things instead of just allowing them peacefully to come in. Like my eyes get a little bit grippy, and it feels like my attention narrows, like triangular forward in a kind of in a narrow state. Yeah.
I think what's so interesting about this metaphor, and I'm going to go ahead and belabor the Wile E. Coyote metaphor because I too love it. One of the
Please.
things that's missing there, Sharon, and I think for ADHDers is important, is when does Wile E. Coyote fall? He falls when he looks down, and I think that for me, I can operate in a fake emotionally regulated state for a long time after the ground has long left my feet and the crash comes when I'm stupid enough to look down. I could practically fly if I just stopped looking down, which is why I think it's so important to start this process as a practice when there's still ground beneath my feet. That
Yes.
prevents the crash, right? So that looking down part is an important trigger that I'm about to crash.
I absolutely love that, because I think in a way, if we continue with this metaphor, it's not even looking like, for people when you were losing it, or you're spewing, or whatever, it's kind of like suddenly looking around. It's breaking that trance and looking around at people and being like, "Oh, wait a minute. What I'm doing is not okay."
Yeah, the difference between this sort of intrinsic emotional experience and the extrinsic emotional awareness. Like I can be totally focused on my own shame and dysregulation and not read the room. And reading the room is what actually can trigger the crash. It brings me back to awareness. It brings me back to, oh my God, my behavior is inappropriate right now. I just yelled at my child.
Certainly can be part of when the shame comes in.
Yeah. It's so painful. I mean, I definitely yelled at particularly one of my kids more than I wish I had, and, as an adult, they let me know that that was traumatic for them, and
And that they remember it.
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And, and I have felt horribly guilty. I mean, I'm gonna just say that, like, perimenopause and adolescence and ADHD are not a good mix. But, you know, um, so I can be accountable, which I have been. I have been, I apologize, but if there's no an accountable, yes, I did that. And then the third leg of the stool is change in behavior. So you can say you're sorry and you can own your behavior, and then if you continue to do it, those things don't matter anymore. It's what are you doing to respond differently to the intense feelings that you have. You're not letting it go into an amygdala fight or flight. You're actually feeling that panicky thing, but you're doing it you're taking care of it in a different way. And my number one favorite way that I recommend to everybody is to go to the bathroom. Like, literally, if you are feeling triggered and you are in a public or at your house situation, excuse yourself and go to the bathroom. Because A, going to the bathroom is generally something people do on their own. Even kids understand that. And B, while you're there, you can wash your hands. That can be very kind of grounding. You can splash water on your face. You could take your phone with you and text your lifeline friends or family members or coach or whoever. You could, put the seat of the toilet down and sit there and check a magazine that you might have in your bathroom to distract yourself, healthy distraction. And then when you're feeling like you're, more intact, you can leave. And I will tell you that I have at times sat with my bottom up next to the door of the bathroom because on the other side of the bathroom, there might have been a young person banging on the door,
Oh,
screaming at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And I couldn't leave yet because I wasn't ready and they were still mad. So, you know, this I think is a very simple, straightforward way to go. And um if you're not able to kind of manage it for too long. This then goes into my stop, think, act, and respond, and recover, excuse me, stop, think, act, recover plan, which is like calling a stop when things are building to take a time apart rather than after they've exploded.
I just want to say I really appreciate the going to the bathroom idea because my kids are older now and so I don't have to do that. I mean they know when I need to have a timeout myself, but I could have used that when they were younger for sure because I think that like you said, children understand I need to go to the bathroom because I can't tell you how many times I had a particular child follow me around the house as I was trying to get away. Mom, 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 mom. And to have that tool to say, just a moment, I need to use the bathroom, it would have put the door in between us. And I would have found that very, very helpful. So thank you, Sharon.
And I find like the bedroom is family space. Even our like master bedroom, our kids were always in and out. But the bathroom we could close the door with impunity. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
personal.
I think emotional flooding can feel like a runaway train, right? And if we switch from Wile E. Coyote to, other old-fashioned TV for just a minute, think about like how would you stop a runaway train back in, the black and white westerns? You couldn't just set up a roadblock, which just turns into a train wreck. You can't always divert the train. You have to board it. you have to ride alongside on your horse and then jump on top of that thing and then start to climb forward and redirect it. So I love your idea of like go to the bathroom because it's a way of boarding the runaway train. Like I am aware right now I can't have this conversation with my kid, or I can't stare at this computer screen any longer because I'm freaking out, or I can't keep going in this conversation with my spouse because I'm going to start to yell. And it's a way of saying like, I'm just going to climb right on board this runaway train and start steering, which might be toward somewhere where you can break the trance. Like get out of that situation, move your body in some new way, like up the stairs, or at least go from sitting to standing or standing to sitting and reading a magazine. But yeah, like it is a way to break a trance, and it's a lovely way to create a context shift too, which is part of that same thing. So back to the 5 Cs.
Well, I mean, I think that the 5 Cs, self control, it's that you notice when you're becoming dysregulated, that we have to pay attention to those signs, those physiological signs. Um, or you can pay attention to some, repetitive negative thoughts, but that's usually harder. It's easier to catch the physical, oh, I'm feeling that thing in my stomach again. And then that's the self control. Okay, I'm having that experience. What are the self-soothers that I've identified previously that I put on my notes section on my phone that I can engage in? Or, what's a lifeline? And self-soothers could be, I'm going to get up and get a glass of water. I'm going to excuse myself from this meeting and use the bathroom. I'm going to, stop what I'm working on, leave a post-it with some breadcrumbs and take a walk, whatever it is, but you've decided in advance what that is. And then compassion is remembering the effect of your dysregulation on other people because it's having compassion for them.
That's the read the room aspect, right?
Correct.
Remember, you're not alone.
Right. The self-compassion piece is okay, people get upset. Like I need to practice forgiveness, but we want to try to it's two sides of the same coin in a way.
It's taking a
Um,
little bit of the accountability piece too. I feel like when you say that is that you're recognizing that this impacted somebody else and my behavior impacted somebody else. Yeah.
right. And that's very hard to do when you're in a takeover, when you're flooded. Because and particularly for ADHD brains that are now not now brains, like, the now is so big and intense. Right, I watched a kid yesterday I was working with, and, his fa he is, kinda mild and attentive ADHD, and his father has ADHD, and his father was gonna be the kid believed that his father was gonna be late to pick him up from the session, which meant that the kid could get to his soccer practice late, and he was his almost 14-year-old big, boy sort of like writhing around on my couch, freaking out that his father might not get there in time for him to change, for him to get to practice. And it was totally it was in his body and his thinking, his body started.
Interesting.
Um,
All right. So collaboration.
so this is actually asking for help. Having something set up, people that you can call, um, that you can talk to help you process if you are dysregulated. And then with kids, working with them on a behavior that they don't like about themselves when they become dysregulated, and how you might be able to assist with that without them feeling blamed or shamed. Consistency is a steadiness. We're never gonna be perfect, we're gonna make mistakes, that's okay. We accept that about ourselves, we're aiming instead for steadiness. So, more often than not, I'm gonna notice I'm noticing more often than not, I'm noticing when I'm becoming dysregulated, and I'm making a different choice. Not all the time, but more often than not, and that's true for our kids too. and then celebrating, noticing, like validating yourself, like, okay, no one else is going to notice that I actually regulated myself in this situation except me, but bravo to me.
Yeah, but I will. Okay.
But I will, and
Confetti.
that's part of the frustrating thing. It's like, the 9 times out of 10 where you regulate yourself and nobody notices, and then the 10th time you don't regulate yourself, that's the one people talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Hmm.
I want to turn to Dodge because one of the things that I've been adjacent to for many years is the gray sequence. You've been on this show to talk about the gray sequence, and it gets me thinking about how you might use the gray sequence to do some of the things we're talking about here today, to build to break the pattern and build the read the room response as well. Can you just give us a quick reminder?
So the gray sequence is a process that can be used as a modality for practitioners, but in this case, very valuably as just a practice for oneself. And it's a way of being with your experience when um, sometimes not everything that's going on inside is solvable. Sometimes our best shot is to dissolve it. Um, and we can get really active in our problem solving, but often we have to start with the first part first, right? So Dr. Sharon's 5 C's are freaking brilliant. As soon as you can get to any part of your adult brain that can make a choice and take an action. And before that, there's this whole world of terror that can happen for people when they feel really flooded and they don't feel like they can think straight or um, or help themselves yet, right? So this process, the gray sequence, arose out of a specialty in trauma and working with a guy, I guess maybe 17 years ago now, who had run out of time in his therapy and run out of money and had to move away and really loved the work we were doing and asked me to teach him to do to himself everything that had come from my doctorate and years of trauma specialty and all of that. And I thought, this is not possible. What came to me in working on it for a little bit was to just teach him a process of kind of joining his experience first with as much compassion as he could come up with. And as much as he could to get out of his head, because this is where we get in trouble, right? I think especially for with with ADHD and high IQ and very active imagination, it's easy to feel something strongly and jump to a thought and then believe the thought and then start building on it. Like, I feel scared, but I'm not aware of that. All I know is I think my friend hates me. He didn't say hi again. He never returns my texts. Right? Now we can build on that. Well, he never returns my texts because think nobody returns my texts. That's not even true, but we think it, so it's true. Nobody returns my texts because I suck as a friend. That's what's going. I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And then before you know it, you are completely paralyzed in what is wrong with me that I deserve this? This has been true since junior high, and we're conveniently forgetting all evidence to the contrary, and we've got ourselves really stuck, right? It can happen bam, 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 like that, so fast. So the gray sequence is a lot of how do you get out of your head when you are having a big experience? And the idea is, first of all, see if you can pause long enough to notice you're having one and what form it's coming in. Maybe thoughts coming through, memories coming through, ideas about the future or the past or, whatever. Whatever it is, the question is always the same. How's that showing up in your body right now?
Mm.
Part of being in a trance is we are completely unaware of our bodies.
Right.
And when we start coming back into our bodies, immediately we begin to board the train and have a chance to change the direction of the trance. We are really good in ADHD at creating trances. We have not yet developed our ability to direct them. And what's really cool about ADHD is there is a special ability to do that once you realize that's a possibility. And so I work with a lot of clients on, I think you're highly hypnotizable and you hypnotize yourself all the time. Have you ever thought of getting good at that?
Interesting.
It's a
Yeah.
fun way to work. So anyway, back to the gray sequence. If you can notice where that is in your body, I just encourage people to go toward that, even with their hands, and bring it some kindness. So we gathered what's going on. We're just reaching. This is g.r.a.c.e. reach to just be with that with some compassion, and then just allow it to get bigger. Like, could you for just a minute not change anything about this? You're freaking out. Great. Freak out as hard as you can, but do it physically first and leave the thoughts alone for a minute. Who knows if those are true? But at least what you do know is your chest is tight, or your belly is twisted upside down, or your shoulders are hanging up near your ears. Could you just be there for a minute and just take a full breath into, I'm just going to let myself feel this way for a second. And then in this work, what we do is, and this can take a little practice, you connect to something that's bigger and outside you. It could be a beloved grandparent on the other side. It could be one client I have loves the almost supernatural sound of wind in trees. So he'll just sit in his mind against a tree. He might be sitting in the bathroom with his back against the door, but in his mind, he's sitting against a tree, and he'll just imagine, can I take this experience and offer it to the trees? My son, years ago, when we had a friend over who was feeling pretty shattered by the loss of his spouse, Benji was only 5, and this guy really needed a safe place to eat dinner. And when I was around the corner, I think washing dishes or something, I overheard this friend say to this little boy, "Hey, Benji, what do you do when you're really sad like me?" And Benjamin said, like he'd been expecting the question all evening, "Oh, you have to go hold it in the beautiful light."
Oh,
Isn't that astounding?
and adorable.
So
Amazing.
I encourage people to just take whatever's going on inside, and for just a minute, we're not going to do anything about it. Just a minute, just a breath. And you hold it out in front of you as though you're holding it in the beautiful light. One nice breath in, and on the exhale, just let your eyes go back and forth between your hands. So it might look like this. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And if you whisper that to yourself, it'll slow your breath down so you get at least one long, slow exhale, and that's really good for stimulating your parasympathetic system. But for just a minute, you're just holding it in the light as it is, and it's kind of this act of humility and surrender, kind of act of gratitude for whatever light or being or presence or universe's compassion might be out there, might just come and be with you while you're just freaking the hell out. So I try to get people to stop and not do anything yet, not even think. Just stop and be in their bodies and move their eyes for a minute and offer this to the life. And then come back, fingertips together like this, and take a big letting go breath and notice, where am I right now? You might need to do a couple of passes of that. But there would come a point where you start to feel a big shift inside. At that point, you've got a lot more choices. Now these 5 C's are actually available because your frontal cortex works a little better, right? You're not just in your limbic system, which is fully formed at 4 years old, literally. And all it knows how to do is desperately run for significance, safety, or belonging. It just desperately wants one of those, but it can't think. And until you restore some access to the rest of yourself, your body, for example, it's really hard to come back into any kind of clear thinking about what could I do right now? And then all these beautiful options are available. Well, one of the first actions you can take is move all that feeling over to technically the Broca's area of your brain and form speech. Say something to someone. Hey, honey, I am really freaking out right now. I realize I'm way behind on my schedule and I'm in a complete panic inside. And I think I need to say that out loud or it's going to run away with me. Or call your friend Pete and just be like, Pete, I'm in that thing I do where I'm in a shame spiral. And then Pete's like, hey, Pete, that's your brain damage. Let's just slow down for a second.
Oh,
Pete's been
man.
calling that my brain damage for a lot of years, which always like, he's just like, "No, that's just brain damage. That's not actually happening right now." And I'm like, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." But it can be something like it could be as simple as like reach out to somebody. It could be, what is the smallest thing I could do right now? Maybe all I could do would be to take one lap around the house. Maybe I could go pee. Maybe I could breathe on purpose instead of breathing like a panicked person. But could I do one small thing?
That's one of the things I like so much about what you're talking about and how these how these work together as like regulatory emergency regulatory strategies is that I think we often undersell the value of reclaiming our body in this process. And I think that's living
Yeah.
with anxiety, like that's another thing that your body just gets out of your control so quickly, through weird pains and heart racing and why can't I feel my left arm anymore, and good Lord, why am I throwing up? I don't know what we're talking about anymore. So I think that I think that it's so, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, I could never do that, like, is not doing it ever worked for you? Right? That's just the question. You got to give something a shot if you're feeling like you're living in this flooded state, and not doing a thing is a strategy, and it may not be playing out the way you think it is. So
Sometimes I am myself, 17 years after coming up with this and teaching it to God knows how many hundreds of people, I can not do all of that if I'm scared enough or upset enough or angry enough or something. So I can do part of it. And it might be just to pause long enough to like notice where is that in my body and see if I can bring just a little bit of kindness to that part of my body and take a full breath. That's it. If I do that much, usually I'd be willing to maybe move my eyes back and forth. And then that starts to downregulate the amygdala, just like we do every night when we dream. And if I can do that, then I can sometimes connect to something bigger than me too, or call a friend or take an action. But you can do just any part of that, including just moving your eyes back and forth. That right there may be calming to you.
I teach. I created something called what I call triangle breathing. So you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, and you exhale for 6, pausing it empty. And that's a very tangible way not only to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, because it's a longer exhale compared to box breathing where it's the same. But then you also have that chance for the pause that you're talking about, Dodge, just being where you are. And I think that that's so important and often scary for people.
Yeah. And if they can know that they are scared and that's okay, uh, all kinds of things start coming back online.
Yes.
A wisdom keeper of mine 25 years ago almost said to me, Dodge, if I could give you any gift in the world, it would be just to know when you are scared.
Mhm.
And I was like, if you could give me any gift in the world, I can think of a lot of better things than that. Like, seriously,
because it
man,
was 25
I
years
got a
ago.
whole list of ideas for you.
Yeah.
And over 25 years, I've come to realize that's probably the most valuable possible thing he could have given me, because when I'm scared and don't know it, all kinds of things happen that don't help me much. I can go into all kinds of thinking that doesn't go well. I can go into all kinds of self-soothing that doesn't go well because I just take the pain over there and make that painful. I can go into all kinds of compulsive behavior, or I can yell at my kid or say something mean to my wife, or often say things that are terribly cruel to myself. And it's all because I don't know that I'm scared and that it's okay for me to just stop and be scared.
Or you might know that you're scared, but you might not feel that it's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That is okay.
Right.
There you
Right.
go.
Folks,
There is a reason we got these two together.
I know this has been an epic finale to our
This has
duos
been great.
series. And thank you both so much for your vulnerability, coming on and meeting each other and doing this together, essentially for the first time. And you are two of our very favorite people. And thank you for lending your wisdom to the show today.
Thank you so much, Pete and Nikki, for having us and have a conversation that veers from intellectual to deep feeling and back again, and strategic ways to cope with intense feeling. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah. And thank you for this show. I love being able to send clients your direction, friends, family members, because there are plenty. And I want to point out one resource that I think a lot of people forget about, and it's the Ask Pete and Nikki window at the bottom of your website. I don't know how many people understand that every single episode has been digested by AI, and you can ask questions and get really sophisticated answers about ADHD, and then it will cite the guests and shows where you could learn more about that. More than 600 episodes digested with guests of all these amazing sorts have answered that's literally the first place I go when I have an ADHD question. I'm like, yeah, what the heck is with the da-da-da-da perfectionism thing? And I'll find 3 episodes I could go listen to right now. Yeah, it's really cool.
Thank you for shouting that out, Dodge. That's really, really great. Thank you both. This is we could do this all day. This has already been an epic episode. So thank you for hanging out, everybody. Be good to each other. Thank you for your time and your attention. And don't forget, if you have something to contribute to this conversation, we're heading over to the Show Talk channel on our Discord server, and you can join us there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level or better. On behalf of Dr. Sharon Saline, Dr. Dodge Ray, Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you next time right here on Taking Control, the ADHD Podcast.